Hey guys, my name is Randy Jones. I am a social work master's major at Denver Metropolitan State University. I'm here today to talk about a very important social justice issue, LGBTQIA rights. This fight has been going on for hundreds of years and it is very dear to my heart. Anytime that I can work on this issue, I choose this. The reason I always choose and chose it this time is for years, I have just been very passionate about fighting for love equality. Um, I think my best friend is part of the gay community, and I've watched him go through the struggles and also the joys of, for example, marriage equality when that was legalized. But I think that it's important that everybody should have equal rights and be able to love who they want to love, identify who they identify as, and not be discriminated against because of that. The meaning, I just want to go over that quickly. LGBTQIA, it stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, pansexual, transgender, genderqueer, queer, intersexed, agender, asexual, and ally community. This has evolved over the years. It started out as GLS, which stood for gays, lesbian, and straight allies. Straight allies was included to just show the ones who supported the cause. Then it went to GLBT, and the B was for bisexual, and the T was for transsexuals. It was adapted to accommodate more varieties of the sexual orientations and sexual genders, or identity genders. And then the letter S was removed to show the importance of just the own participants. And then it went to LGBT. The L was moved before the G to highlight the need of gender equality into the community. And then it is now the LGBTQIA+ to include all of the different categories. I'm going to talk about some key events in the history of this movement. It has came a long way from the beginning. So I'll start in 1950. Harry Hay founded the Mattagine Society. It was the first gay rights organization. This society was created to help to eliminate discrimination and assimilate homosexuality into the mainstream society. 1952, the American Psychiatric Association listed homosexuality as a sociopathic emotional disturbance. Immediately after this was listed, it was highly criticized by mental health professionals, people in social sciences, because it had no empirical or scientific evidence. In 1953, President Eisenhower signed an executive order banning homosexuals from working for the federal government or any of its private sectors. This order listed homosexuals along with alcoholics and neurotics as security risks. That makes me cringe. I can't imagine being told that I was a security risk because of how I identify. 1969, the Stonewall riots began after a police officer attempted to raid a gay bar in New York City. This led to a 3-day riot that got very minimal media coverage. One year later, the Stonewall is accredited for starting the fire under the current LGBTQIA movement. Then 1 year later, in 1970, the first gay pride was in New York City in Central Park on the anniversary of the Stonewall riots. In 1973, homosexuality was removed as a mental illness by the American Psychiatric Association. Ooh, that's another great step forward. In 1993, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy was implemented in the military. This policy made it so homosexuals could serve in the military, but they weren't allowed to talk about it. They weren't allowed to act on it. They weren't allowed to be asked or required to reveal if they were homosexual. This was a small move in the equality movement, but it still made people in this community have to hide who they were, and that affects them in many different ways. In 2004, Massachusetts became the first state to legalize gay marriage. In the years following, many other states followed suit. In 2009, President Obama signed the Matthew Shepard Act into law. This expanded the 1969 hate crime law to include crimes motivated by victims' actual or perceived genders, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. 2010, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, so homosexuals were now able to serve openly in the military. They can talk about it. They can, be themselves. In 2013, DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act that we talked about that President Clinton signed, was overturned by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional and that the federal government cannot discriminate against married, lesbian, and gay couples for the purposes of determining federal benefits and protections. And then finally, on June 26, 2015, with a 5-4 decision in the Supreme Court case Obergefell versus Hodges, same-sex marriage was legal in all 50 states. This was such a huge obstacle to overcome. I remember just celebrating with everybody, that they were able to now marry the people that they love. So why do we need to take action? Why is this important? I'm going to talk a little bit about the youth right now, the LGBT youth. So people in the LGBT community are part of every group, religious group, age, ethnic. They're all over the world. I want to talk about some conversion therapy because I'm very passionate about this being outlawed everywhere. It has been in Colorado, but it is allowed in other states. Conversion therapy is a therapy that youth are forced into, usually by their parents, in an attempt to turn them straight, to take away their feelings of homosexuality, and have feelings for the opposite sex, which in turn makes them feel very badly about themselves. There's no evidence that supports that sexual orientation can be changed, and there is a lot of warnings that conversion therapy can be harmful. In 2007, there was research done through the American Psychological Association on the results of conversion therapy. The report noted that there was very little research on sexual orientation change efforts. And there's very little research that shows your sexual orientation can be changed or you can become attracted to somebody else than you are now. There's also a study published in the Journal of Homosexuality, and it provided evidence that conversion therapy during adolescence is directly related to your mental health, to poor mental health outcomes. So it's really affecting how they feel about themselves. 92% of youth in this community say they hear negative messages about being LGBT. 4 in 10 say the community in which they live in is not accepting. So there's a lot going on of them being pushed away, discriminated against, not feeling like they can be who they are. A study done in 2017 showed that despite progress in the equality movement, the discrimination remained a widespread threat to this community's well-being, health, and economic security. We have some data from a national survey that shows that 25.2% of people in this community have experienced discrimination in the past year because of their sexual orientation or gender identity in some form. In the workforce, between 11% and 28% of LGBTQIA workers have reported losing a promotion simply because of their sexual orientation, and 27% of transgender workers report they have been fired, not hired, or denied a promotion in the last year because of this. Discrimination also routinely affects LGBT people beyond the workplace. It costs them their homes, access to schooling. There's very high homelessness in especially LGBT youth. Discrimination affects these people in so many different ways. It's affecting their emotional, physical, spiritual well-being. They're being affected daily in everything that they do. I like this little picture over here. mature societies no longer make these demands, so you don't have to convert past for something else or cover up who you are. Here's some statistics that I thought were good for why this is so important. Why do we need to fight? This is why we need to fight. These high rates of discrimination are so sad and just not right. It's an issue in our society. LGBT youth make up 5% of the youth population, but 40% of the homeless population because they're denied access to housing due to the discrimination. They have there's 9 times higher suicide attempts than someone who's not part of this community, 3 times more likely to have substance use disorders. It's more likely to develop alcohol disorders. The discrimination is just affecting them in so many ways. And it's time that we stand up and we join this fight. We all need to come together. We all need to come together, just like, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. So I think to talk about what we can do on the micro level, the individual level, we all need to stay educated, constantly educate ourselves on this movement, know what's going on, know the history, know what's coming up, know the fights that we're in right now, know the fights that we may face in the future. Practice cultural humility. I think that it is very important as social workers for us to be aware of our own cultures and other cultures. So it's important to have knowledge of this because you can provide the best services to these other cultures that are very sensitive. The intersecting cultural identities. I think that this is important because you can know it's easier to understand the challenges and discrimination that they face for their intersecting identities, not just being homosexual or also being Black or things like that. You have to it's lifelong, constantly educate yourself on these things. I think affirmative therapy is another great way to do this on an individual level. Affirmative therapy validates the identities and experiences of people in the LGBT community. It does this by using eye contact, asking questions, encouraging opening up about struggles and culture, and using inclusive language and open-ended questions. I think all of these things are great ways that we can all come together, educate ourselves, and use these practices when we're working with this community on an individual level. What we can do on a meso level or a community level. So I think first, educate ourselves on how we can help them financially too. There's lots of agencies, campaigns. The first one that I think of is the Human Rights Campaign. It's a huge campaign. They work locally, nationally, globally on issues that affect the LGBTQ community. You can donate one time. You can have a monthly allocation. I think this is a great way because this campaign does contribute a lot to this fight. Teaching tolerance and inclusivity and working with community agencies on homelessness and unemployment. I think both of those go together. I'm a social worker for child protection, and I have been for a lot of years. I think that I can use my platform and my connections to be able to go into these schools and work with these agencies that I already work closely with to educate them on the unemployment and homelessness in this community and what we can do to fix it and work with them to fix that. And then finally, on a macro level, on the big level, what can we do? So I think first, stop supporting these big businesses that have discriminatory practices. We can lobby at Congress to pass bills and policies to support equality in this community. Go to Congress and, fight for new bills that we want passed, or fight for bills that we don't agree with that are discriminatory to not be passed. Becoming familiar with legislative officials locally and nationally, and working to meet with them to educate and influence them for new policy and policy changes. I think if you get in there, it's a great, it helps a lot. Rally together. We all need to come together now. Use our different platforms. We need to come together on this fight for love equality, and do this together, and then protest and fight for what we want and get the equality that we desperately need.